What's up, guys? I wanted to do a reaction to Dapper Dev. If you haven't seen any of his videos, go check him out. He speaks a lot of truth, and I like I like some of the things he says. Good content, lays it down, tells it how it is, and this video here, my generation is different. A message to all of the millennials feeling a bit off. I thought this was a pretty good video and kind of hit home as I'm a millennial as well, and a lot of what he says, I was like, yep, that resonated with me pretty well. So I thought I'd do a quick reaction to it. All right, let's get into it.
I've been doing some thinking, and I gotta say, millennials, we gotta be the strangest generation ever. And I say that because we're kind of the first of a lot of things, in a sense. We're kind of the first to really tip over into this new, what's kind of a normal way of thinking now, like as far as being an adult goes. Let me expand a little bit on that. I remember before I was an adult, like as a kid and as a teenager, every 30-year-old that I saw, 30 or above, no matter who they are, where they were from, the walk of life that they walked, the way they lived, their hobbies, their interests, they all conform to normal life at around 30 plus.
Yeah, I can totally agree. Back when I was growing up as well, everybody who was about that I knew of that was about 30 or above, they already conformed to the traditional style of life of job, house, marriage, kids, all that. You know, by 30, they had already kind of moved past their childhood, early 20s, habits, mindsets. Just, you know, in the sense how we would have called it back then is they grew up. You know, but nowadays, a 30-year-old can still be, you know, equated to a 15-year-old back in the 90s or early 2000s. It's just a different world we live in where back then things were a bit easier to obtain. In a 9 to 5 job, 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, you know, it could afford you a house or, you know, a bare minimum apartment. You know, you wouldn't be struggling to make ends meet. You could afford to pay your bills, and so during that time there was incentive to kind of move out of your phases of your 20s. You know, not that they, you know, gave up their passions or what they enjoyed, but they kind of just conformed, like Dapper Dev said here, to the construct that, you know, back then it was worth it because they could be on their own and have their own place, have some money in the bank, you know, some gas in the tank, and smoking on some dank if that's what they so chose. So it's like, but now 30-year-old now is more still kind of like a teenager, like he's about to say, and it's just like, what's happened, you know, like, you know, nothing, you know, if that's how you want to live your life, go for it, you know. But it's like there's something that's happened between back about 30 years ago and now. So it's a very interesting point he's brought up.
No matter what their fashion sense was, the style that they were into, music, skateboarding, other sports, whatever, they all conformed at about 30 years old, give or take a couple years, and became the good employee, the family man or woman. We were the first generation. We were the first generation that has a relatively significant number of people that are overgrown teenagers, myself included. I'm the king of it. I brag about it all the time. 40 going on 18, man. Proud of that too. I get a lot of shit. Maybe it's deserved, but I like the way I am. We're the first generation to have people in mass just be overgrown teenagers. And it's weird because we're the last generation that enjoyed a normal childhood. Like, we had the normal old school childhood before technology, but then we were also the first ones to try out technology, the first ones to really adopt technology.
Yeah, good point, man. Like, we had that old school traditional childhood that, like, you know, the boomers, Gen Xers, us early millennials, we went outside, we rode bikes, we skateboarded, played sports, pickup games. We went to the park. We met in groups of friends and went to the mall, went to the movies, went to the local record shop. Um, After school, we would meet at the mall and just hang out in groups. We had our own little cliques, and we just did everything outside for the most part. We hardly ever stayed inside. We were inside when we were done with the day and about ready to have dinner and go to bed. That's when we came home. So that's how we grew up. And then, the early the early internet was introduced, and I remember we had AOL dial up, and then I remember AOL Instant Message and all that, and so we were the first to kind of I don't know if adopt's the right word, but we were the first to try it out, and but even still though, those things were there, but we still didn't make it our life. We still kind of it's kind of like we had a Sega and a Nintendo. Yeah, we played on it, but we still went outside, and we preferred to be around people and do physical activities and go on adventures and do things outside of the house than to stay home all day and stare at a screen for the most part. So yeah.
I remember sitting in my buddy's basement. Me and my bro were at my buddy's house, and I remember the dial-up. I remember going on the internet and hearing the dial-up sounds and the chat rooms, and I remember printing out pictures of models and stuff and actually watching it print, I remember those days. I remember having a cell phone, and it wasn't a smartphone, but just that ability to communicate with people,
Remember the, I don't know if it was the Boost Mobile walkie-talkie phone? That was a huge thing. When I remember that was a big deal when I was in high school. But yeah, we didn't have smartphones. I didn't have a cell phone until maybe 11th grade, maybe. Yeah, it'd have been 11th, and it was a cheap flip phone that, you might, you call your friends on or your parents. You send a text. I don't even know if we text messaged back then, but yeah, I think we did. But yeah, no, it was just really basic. Just nothing like it is now. No smartphone. We were running around still living the old school life. So
it's amazing. It's amazing to me to sit back and look at the world the way that it was before and how it is now. And we are that middle generation. We are that tipping point where we lived the life before smartphones and technology, and we were the first ones to usher it in, And now we can sit here and look at both sides of the fence and tell the young people, it's crazy how you guys don't go outside and ride your bikes as much, and you don't have the imaginations. Everything's with a phone. But also, we are like the early adopters of technology in a sense. I thought about that today, and I'm thinking, I don't know what the world's going to look like in the future. You know what I mean? I wonder what the world's going to look like with the younger generation and even my generation as we get older. So many of us that I grew up with, at least in my area, so many of us are still overgrown teenagers. A lot of us already had this sediment in our mind of buying a big house, or house in general is kind of out of reach, with things that happened when I was a teenager. Jobs weren't that plentiful in my area. People weren't really getting home loans. Again, at least in my area, my generation, my friend group.
I think the '08 housing collapse has a lot to do with what he's saying as well, where prior to '08, buying a house was still an obtainable thing through, may not even needed a college degree. Maybe you just got good at a trade, or you worked your way up in a company or a retail store, whatever. You could probably afford to buy a house, maybe. But after '08, it's just completely out of reach for most people. And then so a lot of people, when they hit these millennials, when they hit 30, they knew that, so they didn't really have the incentive to shift their mindset to conform to the traditional system like the 30-year-olds did when we were growing up, because then there was incentive. With us, the majority of us millennials, there was no incentive.
we didn't really have that, you know. I remember watching the older generations and thinking to myself, there was a point when I thought to myself, man, I'm on a different road. Like, my timeline's not lining up with this. I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm 30 when I was 30. I remember thinking I'm 30. And I looked around and I thought back to people older than me when they were that age, when I was a kid and whatnot. I was like, I'm much different. I'm still a teenager. I'm still out here chasing punani. I'm still acting like I got forever on this planet. Forget the future. I'm living in the moment. It's crazy to me. I don't see that many people that I grew up with that have went down the road of, you know, marriage, family, career, tuck your shirt in. And the people that I do know that did that, 80 to 90% of them regret it. You know, that way of life didn't really pan out for many of us because the world was changing.
Yeah, so like a 30-year-old in 1996 is a lot different than a 30-year-old in 2016. You know, like, and the people who still like went for it, well, they realized how hard it is to maintain that in the economy, because everything is so way more, even in 2016 is way more expensive than it was, you know, in 96 or even 2006. Like, so it's harder to maintain that lifestyle, hence why they regret it. They're like, well, I could have just stayed single, no kids, and I'd be doing better right now. So it's easier to like revert to that mindset as opposed to someone in 96 or 06, 86 who went for that and it wasn't that much of a burden, you know, and it paid off with you know, they got the house, they got, you know, the wife, the kids, and it just worked out for them. But for us generation, us millennials, you know, everything was a lot harder for us than it was for previous generations, and even more so for Gen Z, you know.
Changing with the internet, social media, jobs, the way people are hired. Things are changing, you know, and they were changing when I was coming up. Not as much, but I saw the beginning stages of it, you know. And I look now and I go, we are the generation that's stepping up now to be responsible for shaping the world, in a sense, being a big part of it anyway. And I don't know how good of a job we're going to do. I don't know if any of us even give a damn enough to care, to try.
Yeah. Once the boomers die off, us millennials, we're on deck, especially us early millennials born in the mid to late 80s, early 90s. We're on deck to take over the world, and it's a great question he's presenting here. Are we ready? Do we have the knowledge? Do we have the motivation? Do we have the mindset? Do we have the experience? Do we have the education? You know, can we do this? Can we step up and take over? I mean, can we do any worse than the boomers did, you know? It remains to be seen, but either way, it's going to happen.
Try. A lot of millennials are checked out. A lot of millennials live in a state of just nostalgia. We long for the past. A lot of us long for a time that we weren't even around in. Like I said before, I always watch Seinfeld and the Wonder Years and Columbo, and I watch all these old shows. Perry Mason. Perry Mason's a good one too. You know? Andy Griffith's show. God, I can go on and on. I watch all these old shows. And
yeah, same here, man. Like, there was a time when I wish that I was teenager 20 in the 60s, so I got to enjoy all that music that I love, like Hendrix and Zeppelin, you know, the Beatles, all that great music that I got into when I learned to start playing guitar. But then that kind of shifted to, like, I kind of wanted to be a 20-year-old in the 90s because I got more into grunge and alternative music. But I mean, yeah, you know, we tend to long for the past because we remember the old world, how it used to be, so we have a tangible anchor memory to it, as opposed to someone, a Gen Z or the Alpha. They have no idea what we're talking about when we mention these things to them, you know. Like, early Gen Z maybe to an extent, but like they didn't really get the full experience like we did. So when we go down memory road, nostalgia, like, it's because we know what it was like, and the world is so vastly different compared to now and then. Like, I never really heard my dad when I was You know, when I was like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, he never really like reminisced about, you know, the 60s, 70s, kind of the 80s a little bit, but not really, like, because the world wasn't that much different in the 90s compared to like the 80s or 70s. It was some difference, but not a whole lot. But now 2025 compared to 1995, that is a big difference, which is why I think a lot of us do have nostalgia and have these moments where we look back in time.
I follow on IG. I follow all these like nostalgia pages that have like the music playing, and they have these AI scenes of like 80s Miami and 1980s New York. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I was born in 86. I wasn't even around back then. I like to think to myself, sometimes I watch like these mafia documentaries and stuff, these mob documentaries. And I think, man, sometimes I would like to be who I am now back then. Like, I would like to have been who I am now back then. Somebody over here has got a serpentine belt squealing on the car and it's driving me crazy. Please ignore that. But yeah, sometimes I think back and I go, man, I long for a time that I wasn't even a part of. Maybe it's a past life. Do you guys believe in that? I'll get these visions in my head sometimes of like 1960s, 70s, 80s Chicago or New York or LA, you know? And I don't know if that's just because I'm sick in the head. Maybe I'm a little off, a little wacky, a little crazy. But I hear that a lot from other millennials. A lot of us are living in like this nostalgic world in our mind. We were the first generation to kind of say like, I don't like the world that I live in. I don't like the way things are. Take me back in time. Take me somewhere else. Where's my time machine? Where's the...
Yeah, man. I can totally relate to that. Like, me and my friends used to say it all the time. Like, man, we wanted to go back to the 60s and go see the Doors in concert and, you know, like go to Woodstock. Like, we wanted to go back into that time in the early 2000s, which early 2000s weren't even that bad, but we still had that yearning to be back in a better time in the early 2000s. Imagine now. I mean, no wonder we're doing it, because it's compare the early 2000s to now. There's no comparison, really. It's still a completely different world.
The time machine when I need it? Where's the flux capacitor on the DeLorean? I'm ready to go. I see it and I hear it with young people now, and I see it and I hear it with older people now too, but I think our generation were the ones spearheading that. We were the first ones to really be that way and to think that way. What a weird world we live in. I don't want to overthink it, because you'll drive yourself crazy if you overthink it and over worry. At the end of the day, you got to just kind of live in the moment, you know? Make the best of your situation, and like I always say, find a reason to smile. It's hard sometimes, like lifting weights. You've got to exercise that ability to practice thinking about things that you're grateful for. You've got to exercise that ability to find things to make you smile. It's hard sometimes, but you got to do it. Anyways, that's enough of this rant. Let me know what you guys think. Am I crazy? I'm sure I'm a little crazy, but I'm sure a lot of you can understand where I'm coming from.
All right, so I'll leave it there, but nah, you're not crazy, Dev. I'm right there with you, man. I think a lot of millennials can agree with you, and it's just our generation is truly unique, and, you know, but from here on out, you know, we just have to move forward and find a reason to, you know, motivate us, find that reason that keeps us motivated to do the things we love and pursue passions, and, you know, try to somewhat regain that past that we used to have, where it was so innocent and the world was just so much of a better place. And unfortunately, it seems like that world is gone, but, you know, we do have it in our memory, and we can at least take those memories to try to make the world and our lives better to some extent, even though we're living in a dystopian dumpster fire that's probably going down pretty soon here. But hey, at least we have those old nostalgic memories of watching Seinfeld in the Wonder Years, and, you know, Sunday morning cartoons and all that, Sega Genesis. But all right, just wanted to react to Dapper Dev. Great channel, great content. Subscribe to him if you haven't, and check out some of his vids. All right, peace.